The night I saw my late son's widow digging under my porch, in the middle of a thunderstorm, I thought the grief had finally made me lose my mind. She was on her knees in the mud, a flashlight between her teeth, digging like she was trying to bury a sin. And when she pulled out a small metal box, wrapped in cloth, I realized she wasn't burying something. She was taking something out. The next morning, I dug in that same spot. My trowel hit metal. Inside a rusted lunchbox were dozens of letters from my son Ethan, letters written before he died in what everyone called an accident. But the last letter wasn't like the others. It said, "If you're reading this, Mom, it wasn't the weather, and it wasn't an accident." That's when I knew. My son had uncovered something dark, and his wife Clara had come back to erase it. What she buried that night was the truth. Beat, thunder crashes, music swells. I just didn't know yet that the truth was still breathing. And wearing a baby's hospital bracelet. My name is Martha Green, and for most of my 65 years, I believed that in Iowa, you can read the truth of a family the way you read the sky before a storm, by smell, by color, by the way the trees go still. I believed a home held onto your secrets the way old floorboards hold onto dust, quietly, stubbornly, forever. I believed that about our farmhouse, about the porch Ethan and I hammered together after my husband died, about the blue mailbox with its dent on the left from the time a tractor backed into it. I believed I knew every squeak of this place. And then, one April night, I watched my late son's widow kneel in the driving rain and dig under my porch with a gardener's trowel like she was trying to unearth a buried sin. The storm had rolled over the fields before sundown, long, low thunder like a truck on gravel. I'd closed up the house, stacked kindling by the stove, and sat with a blanket on my lap listening to the roof ping. When the headlights swung across my living room, slow, two wide arcs creeping along the ceiling, I stood up because I recognized the engine sound even through the rain. It was Clara's SUV, the white one Ethan insisted she didn't need and bought anyway because it's safer, he'd said. She'd said nothing then, just smiled with that studied sweetness she wore like a cardigan. I moved to the window, careful not to catch the light. Out by the porch, she cut the engine and left the door open so a dinging sound ticked through the rain like a metronome. She wore a hooded raincoat and thin leggings that clung to her calves in the wet. For a long minute, she stood perfectly still with her head turned toward the fields, and then she hurried around to the back and returned with a metal tin and a shovel. Not even a shovel, one of those little trowels I used to keep by the zinnias. She knelt at the far end of the porch, where the steps meet the foundation, and pushed the trowel into the mud. People move differently when they think no one can see them. There's an honesty to it. Clara was always slow and precise in front of others, her movements measured, her smile neat. But that night she dug like a scared animal, quick, jerky, stop-start, wiping her hands on her legs, twisting to look over her shoulder even though there was nothing to see but rain. After a few minutes, she leaned back on her heels, set the trowel down, and used her hands to pry something out of the mud. She put the object into the metal tin, clamped the lid, and carried everything to the fire pit in the yard. In that rain, the fire should have laughed at her and gone out. It didn't. She dumped the contents into the pit, then lit a road flare and held it in both hands, and the flame crawled across soaked papers like it had been waiting its whole life for the chance. I didn't throw on boots or grab my phone. I didn't shout. I watched, because sometimes watching is the only thing an old mother can do after she's buried her boy. I watched the red light throw Clara's face into plains and hollows. I watched her open the tin once more, hesitate, then tuck one last envelope inside her coat instead of burning it. When she was finished, she stood with her back to the house and her face to the fields. My fields. Ethan's fields. And she let out a long breath I could not hear, but felt somehow the way you feel a train cross 3 miles away. She went back to the porch, kicked dirt back over the hole with her heel, and drove off with the driver's door still dinging until it clicked shut. I didn't sleep. I sat in my chair, hands wrapped around a cold mug, and listened to the storm travel east toward the river. At dawn, the field steamed and the yard glittered with wet leaves and ash. I put on Ethan's old work coat, the canvas one with the flannel lining, and went outside. The fire pit was a mouth of black teeth. At the porch's far edge, the dirt was darker and softer where she dug. I knelt. The mud had a smell of pennies. Under the first few inches, the dirt went tight, compacted the way it gets when it's been pressed for a long time. My trowel hit metal with a neat little ring. I worked around the edges with my fingers, sucking my teeth when I hit a root, easing it out slow. It was a tin lunchbox, the kind with a clamp and a handle, only the handle had long since rusted off. Someone, Ethan, had wrapped it in a layer of oiled cloth. I lifted the tin, and my hands shook because things that are wrapped like that are wrapped to last. On the kitchen table, I set the tin down on an old bath towel and cleaned it with the corner of my sleeve. The clamp resisted, then popped up with a sound that felt like someone speaking my name. Inside, letters. Dozens of them. Not in envelopes, just pages folded, bound with twine in 2 thick stacks. At the bottom, a smaller sealed envelope with my name in Ethan's blocky handwriting, "For Mom, if I die before you read this." The only sound in the house was the kitchen clock. I have a way I breathe when I'm trying not to cry, short, through my nose, like I'm sniffing for something burning. I held the small envelope, thumbed its edge, opened it with a butter knife, and slid out a single sheet. "If you're reading this, something happened. I need you to forgive me for not telling you sooner. I didn't know how without putting you in danger. I think it's getting worse. I'm going to do every single thing I can to protect what matters. If I don't make it, it'll be because I messed up the timing. But know this, it wasn't an accident and it wasn't the weather. I changed the will. You'll understand when you find the other letter with the baby bracelet. Tell the truth even when they call you crazy. I love you. E." I sat down without meaning to, the chair catching me. I read it again and again until the words went out of focus and came back. Ethan had died the previous September. Tractor flipped at dusk in the south field. Coroner said blunt force trauma. Sheriff said wet grass on the grade by the creek. Pastor said God's ways are not our ways. I had accepted it because what else could I do? I'd folded the flag they gave us at the volunteer firehouse. I'd stood beside Clara while she held herself like a person about to break and took casseroles from neighbors who did not know where to look. I had repeated, gentler each time, it was the rain, and he was tired, and it only takes a second for a machine to go the wrong way. And now, here was a note that said a different thing altogether. I untied the twine from the thicker stack, and the smell of paper and dirt filled the kitchen. The first page was dated the spring before Ethan died. He'd written in pencil, careful print, "Met Clara at the seed co-op. She asked more questions about insurance than a person usually does. Says she's starting over, wants to learn a trade, wants quiet. She's good with her hands. She does this thing with her face when she's pretending to listen. I know you'd notice it. I didn't. I told her about Dad's tractor. She said machines don't scare her. I like that. I want something quiet too." The fields were loud today with red-winged blackbirds. I read the next, and the next. 2 a week, sometimes less. Ethan had never been a writer in school. Math and engines came easy. Composition did not. But the letters were careful and full of the small things you miss about a person when they're gone. The way he noticed the birds, the way he counted minutes between thunder and strike, the way he worried the tractor sounded a little off and promised to get to it this weekend. And then you'd find a sticky note on the steering column reminding himself, in all caps, "Don't forget the pinch roller." About halfway down the stack, the tone shifted. A paragraph ended, and the next began with a line I had to stand up to finish reading. She didn't come home after dark like she said. Said she'd been at work late. I kept the light on, and I waited. And something mean in me I didn't know I had started to talk. The mean voice said she wasn't at work. The mean voice said check her phone. I didn't. I went out to the porch and sat where we can see the corn, and I told the mean voice to go on inside and make itself useful and fix the cupboard hinge. In the morning, she apologized and said, "I'm paranoid. Maybe. It's hard to tell the difference between paranoia and instinct when you used to trust like a fool." I read until my eyes refused. Then I got in the truck and drove into town with the little envelope tucked into my coat pocket like a talisman. The sheriff's office sits beside the Caseys and smells like coffee and wet dog. Sheriff Reeves is younger than me, but only just, with a kind of permanent squint that comes from decades of looking at distances. He stood to shake my hand and said, "Martha, In the way people around here say that name, like they're checking on you while saying hello. I put the envelope on his desk and told him what I'd seen Clara doing in the storm. I told him about the lunchbox, about the letters, about the line that said it wasn't an accident. He didn't reach for the envelope. He reached for the legal pad he uses when he's doing what he calls listening. He wrote down dates, asked me to back up twice, asked if anyone else had seen the fire. When I finished, he let out a breath and leaned back so the chair squealed. "It's been 7 months, Martha," he said. "If there was foul play, I'm not saying there was, but if there was, we should have caught something." "If there was, you didn't," I said, and the sharpness in my voice surprised me. He didn't get defensive. "I can take the letters. We'll log them. We can have a look at the incident report again. But you know how it works. Without something concrete, a judge isn't going to sign off on exhumations or subpoenas or anything else that's going to make your life harder than it already is." "Something concrete," I said. "Like a baby bracelet?" He looked up. The squint changed. "What bracelet?" "Ethan wrote the other letter with the baby bracelet. He changed his will. He said so." I hadn't found the bracelet yet. But when a mother hears a line like that, she knows it's not a riddle. It's a map. He said he'd send Deputy Marsh out to the farm that afternoon to collect the tin. He said he'd look for the other letter with the bracelet. He said he was sorry about Ethan again, and I nodded and went back out into the spring light that made everything look too bright to be trusted. On the counter by the sink, the letter stacks waited like patient animals. I picked up the second bundle, fewer pages, tied separately, and found near the bottom a sheet folded into a tight square with an elastic band around it. When I lifted it, something light slid out and clicked onto the wood. A hospital ID bracelet, newborn size. The round plastic tab was blank. No name, just the size and a barcode. Inside the folded sheet, Ethan had written 3 paragraphs in a smaller, more deliberate hand. "If you're the one holding this, it means I've failed at keeping 2 people safe. You and someone you haven't met. I found the test in the bathroom. She said it was old, that it wasn't hers, that I'm making it all up in my head because I'm too much like you. I don't mean that bad. I mean, you always see the thing before it happens. She says she wasn't ready to tell me because she knew I'd try to make it more than it is." I told her I'd change the will. She laughed. "I went to Daniel because I don't know wills, and he drew it up and said, I can come back any time if I change my mind." I didn't. I put a copy in the safety deposit box and one under the ledger in the top drawer and one, this one, in the lunchbox. Because if you're going to dig for the truth, you might as well leave a shovel where a person can find it. If you can't find my copy, check with Daniel, he'll have it. Only don't tell him why you're asking. He thinks Clara is the sunrise. If something happens to me, look for the baby. Someone will try to make her disappear. I'm writing her because that's how it feels when I think about it. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm crazy, but I think I'm right. The house felt smaller by the time I reached the end of that paragraph, like the walls had moved in without the floor's permission. I set the bracelet aside, picked up the phone, and called the nurse at Dr. Boswell's office because I didn't know who else to call about something that felt like both medicine and a prayer. "We can do a DNA test on a bracelet like that?" I asked, and she said yes if there's sweat or skin cells, yes if we can match it to you to establish relatedness. "We send out to a lab in Des Moines. It's not cheap." I said my late husband had life insurance that hadn't been spent on anything but grief. I could manage a test. The nurse's name, it turned out, was Claire. She had a voice like someone who knows when to talk and when to let silence do the work. "Are you okay, Mrs. Green?" she asked after we'd set the appointment for that afternoon. People who ask that question well are rare. I told her the truth, which was that I didn't know. "That's fair," she said. "Drive safe. Take a bottle of water. It's warmer than it looks." At 2, I handed over the bracelet and a swab from my cheek in a beige room with a poster of a lake on the wall. By 3:30 I was home and the deputy was at my table with latex gloves and an evidence bag, which felt obscene next to my flour canister. He logged each letter and the smaller envelope and the bracelet receipt. He didn't take the bracelet. It had to go by chain of custody with the clinic to the lab. He did take the tin and the bundles of pages. He was polite the way people are polite when they aren't sure if your grief has curdled in the jar. That evening, looking for something I couldn't name, I walked the house and touched the places Ethan had touched last. the dented wall by the back door where he'd rested his toolbox too hard one July, the scorch mark under the stove vent from the time he nearly set the bacon grease on fire, the porch post with the notch we carved the day we raised it, a pencil line marking the spot for the lag screw, the handwriting half his, half mine. I ended up on the porch steps without remembering how I'd sat down. I looked at the far edge where Clara had dug. I hadn't told Sheriff Reeves what else I saw that morning. After I'd dug out the lunchbox, there was a second patch of dirt whose darker color didn't match the way the rain had fallen. I scraped a little with my fingers and found the corner of an envelope, slick and brown. I worked it up slowly. Paper goes to mush in the ground, and a ruined thing is a ruined thing forever. I coaxed it into my palm and slid 2 fingers inside. Empty. The envelope's flap had been sliced with a knife. That was the envelope she saved from the fire. I kept the empty envelope. I set it inside the drawer with the tea towels. A silly thing to do, maybe, but some objects keep a room honest by their mere presence. You can feel them in the way the drawer closes. 2 days later, the lab called. "Mrs. Green? This is Claire at Dr. Boswell's office. We got your preliminary back a little early. I could wait until you're here, but I thought maybe you wouldn't want to wait." Her voice softened around the word preliminary, and I braced myself because you can feel kindness coming the same way you can feel a cold front. "Tell me," I said, and my hand found the edge of the kitchen sink. The sample on the bracelet is a low yield, but it matched a profile consistent with a first-degree relative of your son. The odds ratio is very high. The simplest way to put it is there's a strong likelihood the bracelet belonged to your biological grandchild. I made a sound like someone had knocked the wind out of me. I turned to the window because I needed distance for the world to stay in focus. The line of cottonwoods along the fence looked like they were listening. Is there a way to know now? Now, not without a direct comparison to the child. I'm sorry, I know that's not the answer you want. It's the exact amount of an answer I can live with, I said, and surprised myself with the steadiness in my voice. After I hung up, I called Reeves. He said, "Okay," in a tone men in law enforcement use when they are adding another pebble to the scale and waiting to see if it tips. He said he could request the original coroner reports and the mechanical assessment on the tractor, though the mechanic who'd written that report had since moved to Council Bluffs to work at a dealership. He said, "Give me a day or two," and I said I'd give him until sundown. I didn't tell him I had a plan that didn't require court orders. I drove to the office of Daniel Harlan, attorney at law, who had been Ethan's classmate in high school and had the kind of face people call handsome until they have to trust it. Daniel's office is in a converted bungalow with bright parking lines and a handicapped spot painted too close to the back steps. "Mrs. Green," he said when I walked in, standing behind his desk to make me come to him. "Always a pleasure. How are you holding up?" That's a question the people who don't know how to ask questions ask. "I need a copy of Ethan's will," I said, and I watched his eyebrows do the thing that says, "Ah, so this is about that." "Of course." He opened a manila file drawer. "We handled the estate last fall with the life insurance and the title transfer on the SUV, but as far as I recall, Ethan hadn't finalized He finalized one," I said, because now I could taste it, the thing he didn't want to say. "He wrote it, you drew it up, he signed it, and you filed it. And if you forgot, you can remember." Daniel smiled, very small. "It's possible we drafted something he didn't execute." "It's possible you're full of it," I said, and he blinked because old women in Iowa don't say that unless they've decided courtesy is a luxury. "My son wrote that he changed his will. He wrote that you drew it up. I have his handwriting, I have the page, I have the bracelet. I have a sheriff building a list I'll be proud to hand to a judge." "I'm sure this is a very stressful time," he said, "and when men say that to you, they're announcing that they believe you're weak and hoping you'll prove them right." "Make a copy," I said, "or I'll subpoena it." That put a small crack in his handsome face. "Let me see what I can pull," he said, and left me in the reception area with a stack of 6-month-old Field and Stream. When he returned, he held a folder out like it might bite him. Inside was Ethan's will, signed and stamped 2 weeks before he died. The language was simple. Any non-liquid property to be held in trust until the birth of his child, at which point all real estate and savings accounts would be transferred to the child's name, with guardianship to be decided by the court if the mother was unwilling or unable. If the child did not survive to 18, the remainder would go to me, to be used at my discretion for the farm's upkeep. Why didn't we execute this? I asked. We did. It's in the system, he said. But there were objections. From whom? He didn't answer, which was, of course, an answer. He closed the folder and steadied his voice. Martha, I would advise you to be careful how you proceed. There are a lot of moving parts here. Allegations, feelings. You don't want to stir up. I do, I said. I absolutely want to stir up. I took the copy and drove home with my shoulders set so hard my neck ached. When I turned onto our road, there was a sign I hadn't seen that morning. A metal post with a plastic placard that read, "For sale," in red letters with a phone number beneath. Someone had driven it into the ditch in front of my mailbox like a joke. I pulled to the shoulder and got out and yanked the sign until the post came out of the mud with a slurp. I tossed it into the bed of my pickup and then stood there with the wind working my coat until the heat in my face cooled. I checked the number. It wasn't the local realtor. It was a cell with a Colorado area code. I put the sign in my garage beside the push mower, and I closed the door like I was tucking a child into bed. That night, someone knocked on my back door at 9 sharp. People knock on the front door to be polite or the side door if they know you. People knock on the back door when they want to move around your life as if it's theirs. I reached into the drawer beside the stove where I keep the heavy cast iron skillet my mother taught me to use for self-defense, and I stepped into the porch light. Clara stood on the stoop wearing a denim jacket and a smile I recognized from funeral photos. Behind her, the yard was a dark ocean. I can explain, she said, and her voice was bright, like a person trying to convince a dog to come inside. What would you like to explain? I asked. Her eyes traveled, quick, across my face, my shoulders, the skillet in my hand. The sign, the letters. I saw Reeves's car at your place. I figured you were telling stories. Come in, I said, and I stepped aside. Let's put them in order. She walked into my kitchen and touched nothing. People who don't belong somewhere keep their hands to themselves out of instinct. I set the skillet on the stove and crossed my arms. You dug under my porch. You burned papers. You took an envelope from the lunchbox and put it in your coat. You did all that in a storm because you wanted the rain to wash away your footprints. Or, she said easily, I was looking for photo albums Ethan told me your mother kept under there, and I found a tin full of mold, and I did you the favor of burning it before it stank up your house. Try again, she shrugged, still smiling. You can't prove a thing. I don't have to, I said, and it was true in a way she could not feel yet. But here's the thing, Clara. There's a bracelet. Her chin tipped just a fraction. A bracelet? A baby bracelet, the kind they put on newborns. Funny the way hospitals do that when you have a baby. Marking a person's life with letters and numbers makes you traceable. Her tongue touched her top lip. It's a small tell, almost nothing. Ethan wanted a family, she said, and the smile went back on like a curtain. I wanted to travel. We were different kinds of people. That doesn't make me a villain. Where is my grandchild? I asked, and the question came out so calm I startled myself. I don't know what you're talking about. You do, I said. And you're going to tell me because there's a sheriff who knows how to ask better than I do, and an attorney who is about to discover that being handsome isn't a legal defense, and a nurse who's very good at comforting people who need comfort, but who can also secure a chain of custody that would impress the FBI. Chain of custody, she said, mocking. Look at you. Look at you, I said back, and the smile slid because people don't like mirrors when they're trying to be someone else. This is your one good faith chance. Clara put both hands on the table and leaned forward like she was about to tell me a secret. Do you really think you can keep a baby at your age? She asked. Do you think a judge is going to hand a newborn to a woman on Social Security who lives 20 minutes from the nearest hospital and thinks rain is a sign from God? I didn't answer because her words were a diversion, and diversions are for people who are moving faster than they can think. I let the silence do the work, and after a long minute she straightened, sighed, and shook her head as if I were a child who had just refused medicine. You want to know what you're up against? She asked. I'll show you. She took her phone out of her jacket pocket, scrolled, and held it up. A photograph. Clara in a hospital room, hair pulled back, sweat dampening the neck of her gown. A baby on her chest. Vernick still on the little head. A nurse's arm entering the frame from the left, gloved hand adjusting the blanket. No faces except Clara's were visible, but the room's calendar said October. The plastic bassinet's card, partially in frame, had a number and the words baby girl. "Whose child is that?" I asked. "You want to tell me?" she countered. "I could have named her Martha to make it easy on you." I didn't. I named her something soft. Soft names get better homes. I didn't move because if I moved, I would move too far. "You sold my grandchild," I said. "Don't say it like that," she said. And if I live to be 90, I won't forget the way she softened her voice on that, because she believed softness was a weapon too. I placed her. I placed her with a private attorney who specializes in families who can offer things you can't. "And the fee?" She looked me in the eyes. 50,000, I said, and she didn't need to nod. "Where?" She slid the phone back into her pocket. "I can't help you, Martha. I can help you help yourself, though. Sell the farm, move into town, get a condo with an elevator. Stop pretending you're 30 and strong enough to lift the world. People will stop bringing you pies and pity once you stop asking for both." I picked up the skillet and set it on the table between us, not as a threat, just as a reminder. "Get out of my house, Clara," I said. "And if you ever step on my porch again without an invitation, you'll learn a great deal about what a woman my age can lift." She left without slamming the door. Narcissists rarely slam. They prefer to let the air close gently behind them, so you don't have the satisfaction of a sound. I drove to the clinic at 10 the next morning with my heart somewhere near the bottom of my ribs. Claire met me in the hallway with a clipboard and a face that managed to be both professional and kind. "Do you have a few minutes?" she asked. "I can put you in an exam room." "I'd rather sit where people sit," I said, and we settled into the corner of the waiting room under a fake ficus. I told her about Clara's visit, about the photograph. Claire listened the way good nurses listen. She watched my mouth as if the words were broken glass, and she was planning how to pick them up without making me bleed. When I finished, she said, "I know a woman at the county who handles private adoption review if there are irregularities. I can make a call." "Thank you," I said. And the second the words were out, I realized I hadn't said them to anyone since September. "Thank you," in that tone that sounds like you've handed a person your weight for a minute and they've chosen to carry it. The county woman's name was Marisol, and before lunch she called me from a blocked number and asked a flurry of precise questions. Did I have digital proof of the photo? Did I have the number from the bassinet card? Did I have any texts or emails that might suggest a private exchange of funds? I had the number and the photo and the will and the bracelet. She said she could begin to cross-reference discharge records and private adoption filings for the window between October and December, but without a name she'd need a judge to open files. "If the bassinet number is legit, that helps," she said. "If the nurse in the photo is identifiable, that helps more." That evening, I took the photograph, enlarged it on my computer, and printed it in high contrast. Photographs are liars, but they brag when you corner them. In the top left corner of the bassinet card, there was a partial hospital logo I recognized. Not ours, but the bigger one in Omaha. In the far left edge of the frame, the nurse's arm had a freckle pattern like a constellation. I took that photo to a support group at the church for young mothers, the one Clara never attended but claimed to help organize, and I asked if anyone had delivered at Omaha General. A girl with chopped black hair said she had. "The nurse's name might be Jen," she said, "or Jenna. She has twin boys. She wears a bracelet with their names, Holden and Nash." The next morning I called the hospital and asked for labor and delivery, and then for Jen or Jenna. "This is Jenna," a voice said, and I put the photograph on the counter and traced the bracelet with my finger as if I could guide her toward the truth with the pad of my skin. "This is an odd question," I said, "but were you working the night of October 14th, and did you help deliver a baby whose mother had the last name?" I stopped, because I didn't want to say Clara's last name into a phone where my voice could be recorded and played back to me later as a kind of trap. A baby whose bassinet tag number might have been 341B? "Ma'am," she said, voice wary, "I can't discuss patient information." "I'm not asking you to," I said. "I'm asking whether you have twin boys named Holden and Nash." A small laugh, surprised. Yes. Then I think you're the nurse in a photograph that will end up in court, and I'm asking you if there's a way to make sure the right side wins. Silence. I could hear a monitor beeping in the background, the low hum of a TV. Who are you? She asked. A grandmother, I said, and that was the truest thing I have ever said. My son's widow placed a child without telling anyone and took money for it. My son changed his will so that child wouldn't disappear. I have letters and a bracelet and a will and a sheriff who wants to believe me, but belief is a luxury in his line of work. I need proof. I don't want to hurt anyone who's innocently involved. I want a baby where she belongs. After another long breath, Jenna said, I can't help you from here, but if someone with a badge asked for my recollection, I would have one. I remember that night because the mother wouldn't make eye contact with the baby. Some don't at first. It can be shock. But this was like the infant was a stranger she'd have preferred not to meet. Thank you, I said, and hung up and called Reeves. While his phone rang, I walked to the back door and looked at the spot where Clara had dug. When he answered, I said, Omaha General. Bassinet number 341B. Nurses Jenna with twin boys named Holden and Nash. We need a warrant. You can't just give me a nurse's children's names and call it probable cause, Martha, he said not unkindly, but I can drive to Omaha. The next 3 days were a lesson in how much waiting a person can do and still be alive at the end of it. The sky was the bright, hard blue we get for a week after a storm, when the ground has given up its extra and the air decides to be clear. I shoveled the last of the ash from the fire pit into a trash bag and tied it with 2 knots. I sat on the porch steps with the lunchbox's empty space at my side like a phantom limb. I said my husband's name out loud in case he was listening. I said Ethan's name in case he wasn't. I said the word granddaughter because I needed to teach my mouth how to carry it. On day 4, Deputy Marsh pulled into my driveway and sat with the engine running until I opened the door, and then he turned it off as if my presence had made it safe. We got a hit, he said. Private adoption filed October 17th through a Denver agency using a local attorney out of Omaha. The agency's on our list for irregularities. The mother's name was not listed. We have a judge willing to open the file if we can show a direct line. The will, I said, and held out the copy. Ethan named his unborn child as beneficiary. Clara will have needed to sever parental rights. If the file shows her signature under a different name, we prove fraud. That opens more doors. Marsh took the will. Reeves is on his way to Omaha now, he said. We're trying to do this without spooking people who have lawyers that wear better suits than we do. That evening, as the sky went pink behind the silo, my phone rang from a number with no caller ID. A woman's voice, the edges bright with tension. Are you Martha? Who is this? A friend of a friend, she said. You don't know me. I don't know you. I can't be on this call. But I placed a baby with a couple outside Lincoln last October, and something about it kept me up every night since. A nurse said the mother didn't even look at her. The attorney hurried me through papers that didn't feel right. I called the agency once afterward, and someone told me to stop asking questions unless I wanted to see my name in a complaint. What do you want me to do? I asked. I don't know, she said, and the way her voice shook made me want to wrap the cord around my hand and pull her into the room. I saw your name on a docket today, that you asked a county to open a record. I thought maybe you were the person the baby belonged with. Do you know where she is? I whispered. No, she said, and then, yes. I mean, I know where she was. The couple posted pictures when they got her home, newborn portraits, a bracelet. The tag said baby girl, same as the one I saw at the hospital. I save everything. I sent myself an email that night with all the details in case anyone ever asked. I've never told anyone, not until now. I'm sending it to this number. Delete it after you read it. Who are you? I asked again, because it matters to say it. A woman who thought she was doing a good thing, she said, and then realized she was doing a thing she couldn't explain to her own mother. A minute later, an email pinged onto my phone. A Gmail address I didn't recognize. Subject line, Girl, October, Omaha. In the body, a list I printed and put under the tray where I keep the salt and pepper. Names, a Lincoln suburb, an address for a pediatrician, the URL for a newborn photography studio, the first names of the adoptive parents, the name of the attorney, Harlan, Denver Partnership. Daniel, of course. I didn't go to the address. I didn't call the pediatrician. I called Reeves, and then I drove to the clinic and sat in my truck under the maple and watched the wind lift and lay the new leaves while I waited for Claire to finish her shift. When she came out, she opened my passenger door and slid in and closed it and put her hands on the dashboard like she was bracing for a stop. I have a line on the baby's location, I said. There's a couple in Lincoln. There's a pediatrician's office with intake paperwork. There's a photo studio with a low-res shot of a bracelet with the same bassinet card numbers. I'm not going to knock on anyone's door. I'm going to give all of it to Reeves, and he's going to do the thing where he asks the judge for more paper, and then, "You're going to need a lawyer," she said softly. "I have one," I said, and the way the words felt in my mouth made us both laugh, sharp and mean. "I'll find a better one." The next week was every story you've heard about how the wheels of justice grind slow, told in a language spoken by clerks and postal workers and paralegals. Reeves drove to Omaha. He met with hospital counsel. He met with the adoption agency. He met with a woman whose job it is to say, "We cannot comment," in 5 different ways. He drove to Lincoln with 2 detectives and spoke to the adoptive couple on their driveway while their dog barked and the porch light clicked on. They had paperwork. They had a framed photo of a judge in a small courtroom with an American flag in the corner. They said they were told the baby was legally free and clear. They said they love her. They said they would fight like animals to keep her, and I believed them because you don't get to judge love by its origin story. We did not try to tear their house down. We tried to tear down the house that had built the lie. The judge opened the file. Clara's name wasn't in it. But a woman named Anna Claire Hall had signed a relinquishment form with a signature I recognized from the back of birthday checks and grocery receipts. The agency had paid a placement stipend, $50,000, dispersed into an account in Colorado. The attorney of record was a firm with a partner who sometimes co-counseled with a small-town Iowa lawyer named Harlan. The file had a photograph of the birth mother that did not show her face. The bracelet number was 341B. Reeves came to my kitchen with a copy of the file and set it on the table as if it were a live thing. "We'll need the county attorney," he said. "We'll need a bigger court. We'll need more time than anybody ever gives a story like this." "How do we keep the baby from vanishing again?" I asked. "We don't," he said. "We keep the people who move her from sleeping well." That night, at 11:17, a text came from a number I didn't have saved. "Meet me behind the grain co-op at midnight. Come alone. Don't bring police. Bring cash if you want answers." A younger woman would have called Reeves and let his men make a perimeter. I am not a younger woman. I put Ethan's coat on and tucked the skillet in a tote bag like a person carrying 2 pies for a party, and I drove into town with my lights off for the last quarter mile. Behind the co-op, the dirt was rutted and the sky tasted like metal. Clara stepped out from behind a pallet stack with her hood down. Her hair was shorter, her mouth thinner, her eyes bright the way raccoons get when they think you're about to do something generous. "You brought money?" she asked. "I brought something better," I said. "Tell me where my granddaughter is." "You think you can pull rank on the family that has her?" she asked. "You think a judge gives a damn about biology when a couple has had a baby for 7 months?" "I think judges give a damn about fraud," I said. She laughed, and it sounded like a glass breaking under a towel. "You don't even know the first thing about what people are willing to print for cash." "You're right," I said. "I'm new at this. Help me learn." "50, she said. "And I'll give you the attorney's Denver contact, the agency's intake supervisor, and the P.O. box where your precious letters lived while you thought your son was doing chores." "No," I said. "No what?" she asked, almost amused. "No money," I said. "No deals. You think I'm here because I'm desperate. I'm here because I'm done being the person you talk down to like a waitress who forgot your ranch. You have 3 options. Walk away, talk to me, or I put your full name and photo on every church bulletin board between here and Lincoln with the words baby seller under it and let gossip do what courts cannot." Her face changed at that. "Not a lot, just enough." "I don't want to hurt the couple that has her," I said. And that was also true. "I want you, and the men who moved the money, and the people who looked the other way. You tell me where my granddaughter is sleeping tonight, and I will make sure the judge who reads her file understands that what she needs most right now is to be safe while the adults clean up the mess they made." For the first time since I'd known her, Clara did not have a line ready. She looked at the dirt at our feet, then at the dark shape of the co-op, then at me. "North side of Lincoln," she said finally, voice flat. "White house with blue shutters, dog named Margot, pediatrician on Pine. Their lawyer's name is Pendry. The woman at the agency uses her maiden name because her husband is a deacon. Her maiden name is Larkin. She plays bridge on Tuesdays. You didn't get any of this from me." "No," I said. "I got it from a woman who thought she was doing good." Clara took a step closer, and I put my hand in the tote bag and curled my fingers around the skillet handle. "You think you're the hero," she said. "You're not. You're just the last person in a chain of people who will ruin a baby's life by telling her she's a prize to be fought over." I thought about the couple with the porch light and the barking dog. I thought about the way love can grow in any soil. "I think I'm a person who believes in telling the truth to a child when she's old enough to hear it," I said. "I think I'm a person who will be there when she has questions no one else can answer." "You won't win," she said. "I already did," I said, "because sometimes the only way to stop a liar is to say a thing you want to be true out loud and plant it like a flag." She melted into the dark, and I stood there a long time after she was gone, listening to the grain elevator hum and the wind talk in the corn stubble. I drove home slow. I slept in Ethan's coat on the couch and dreamed of a baby bracelet clicking against a metal railing, like a Morse code I couldn't decode. In the morning, I told Reeves everything. He closed his eyes at the part about the midnight meeting and rubbed his forehead and said, "I can't protect you if you don't tell me what you're doing." And I said, "You can't protect me if I do," and we both pretended that joke was funnier than it was. He called the county attorney. The county attorney called a judge in Lincoln. The judge in Lincoln called the adoptive couple's attorney. They all said the same thing: "Do not move the baby. Do not move anyone near the baby. We will sort this out with paper, not with panic." For 3 weeks, that's what they did. They sorted. People served papers. People filed responses. Words like temporary protective order and emergency placement and jurisdiction and best interest of the child got thrown around in rooms with wood paneling and flags and solemn clocks. I got a lawyer who wore practical shoes and did not smile for effect. Her name was Grace, and she had the dry, funny manner of people who specialize in cleaning up other people's moral spills. "We are going to be relentlessly reasonable," she told me. "Judges like reasonable. It smells like the thing they promised themselves they'd be when they took the oath." When I wasn't in court or on the phone with Grace, I was home at the farm proving I wasn't a risk. Marisol sent a social worker named Tom to walk through my house and point out outlets and corners and rugs. "You'll need cabinet locks and a safety gate and covers for the radiators," he said, and I said yes to all of it, because resentment is for people who have time to be offended. I took the online infant CPR course at my kitchen table with a bowl of popcorn and a notepad. Claire came over on a Saturday with a box of bottles and a list of brands parents swear by and said, "You're doing great, only I hadn't done anything yet." On the 4th Friday, Grace called. "The judge in Lancaster County has issued a temporary order acknowledging your biological relationship and naming you an interested party," she said. "He is not, at this time, removing the child from the adoptive home. He is, however, ordering a full investigation into the circumstances of the placement and the legality of the relinquishment. That's a big first step." "Does any of that get me a hug?" I asked, and she laughed, and then softer, "Not yet." By Monday, Reeves had filed charges against Clara for fraud and coercion. By Wednesday, a federal investigator had opened a file on the agency. By the following week, Daniel resigned from his partnership and retained counsel. The couple in Lincoln, God bless them, called Grace themselves and asked if there was a way to do what was right without wrecking a life they had built around a crib and a schedule and a pair of small shoes by the door. Grace said yes, in ways that used phrases like co-guardianship during investigation and open adoption framework. I never imagined my life would include phrases like that. Turns out, your vocabulary grows when your heart does. I met my granddaughter on a Thursday afternoon in a courthouse conference room that smelled like lemon cleaner and stale hope. The adoptive mother held her and cried openly in a way that made me want to put a hand on her back. The adoptive father stood behind them both, like a man who'd learned to be a wall, because being a wall was the only thing that kept him from being a puddle. The baby, the baby, had a small tuft of hair that stood up in front and the precise, serious mouth Ethan had at 6 months when he studied his first spoonful of applesauce. The social worker handed me a bottle and said, "Do you want to try?" As if there were any answer but yes. I took her. Lila. They said they'd named her Lila, and I shut my eyes at that because somehow the name fit even though I'd never said it out loud, and I put the bottle to her mouth and she latched, and I did the thing my body remembered how to do, swaying even though I wasn't standing. "Hi," I said, and my voice was the version of my voice I didn't know I had left, the one that lives in the same drawer as lullabies and recipes with grease stains. "I'm your grandma. I'm late, but I'm here." I had 20 minutes with her, 20, and then I handed her back because temporary orders are temporary, and justice is a thing that takes the stairs while you try to hold the elevator. Back home, I took the letters out of the binder Reeves had given back after the logging, and I placed them in a wooden box my husband had made when we were 22. I slid the bracelet into a small envelope and wrote Lila in neat letters. I called Reverend Ames and asked if he still had a key to the church because I wanted to sit somewhere with high ceilings and stupidly colored windows. And he said yes, and I sat in the third pew on the left and did not pray because praying feels like asking, and I was tired of asking. I sat and listened to the radiator pop heat and imagined what the light would look like on Lila's hair when she was 5 and ran down these steps on a Sunday, whether she would be allowed to run, whether it would be my hand she held when she reached the bottom. Clara didn't disappear gracefully. People like Clara don't. She threatened. She called me at midnight from a blocked number and said things I won't repeat. She told Reeves she'd sue the county. She told Grace she had evidence that would blow this whole lie wide open. Then she started to run because running was the only thing left. She cut her hair and dyed it darker and used a card with someone else's name to check into a motel near the interstate. She bought a bus ticket to Denver. She texted Daniel and said the word leverage in a way that made him throw his phone into the river. Reeves set a trap without telling me the details because that's how you keep old women from showing up with skillets. They lured her to a storage unit she'd rented under a false name with the promise of a cash drop from the agency. They watched through a slat until she picked up the bag, and then they stepped in with a simple, "Clara," and the kind of silence that happens in a room when a person's options run out. She ran because she is nothing if not consistent. She hit the chain that holds the roll-up door open at the wrong angle and cut her forearm. She bled on the concrete in a way that made her human again, and when Reeves put a towel on the wound and told her to hold it tight, she did. You can call that compassion, or you can call it protocol. I call it proof that even when a story turns dark, you can find little rooms of grace to stand in while the lights flicker. They charged her with fraud, coercion, money laundering, and a dozen smaller crimes that string together like popcorn. Daniel flipped to save himself and gave them emails and bank transfers and a recorded voicemail in which 2 months later, I walked into a different courthouse with the same lemon smell and watched a different judge read a stack of papers and say a set of sentences in an order that turned my life into a new shape. He recognized the fraud. He recognized the will. He recognized the blood, the bracelet, the letters. He recognized the couple's love for Lila and the way the world is not kind to tidy endings. He recognized that what Lila needed was not a fight, but a family willing to stand in a circle and hold her while the wind did what it does. He signed an order for joint custody during a transition period with a path to full and permanent custody, to me contingent on successful integration and continued cooperation with the adoptive couple in an open arrangement. Translation: we were all going to be a version of a family, whether we liked it or not. You can spend a lot of energy resenting arrangements like that. Or you can pour that energy into buying a crib with a good mattress and a changing table that doesn't wobble, and a mobile with tiny sheep that spins slow enough to make sense to a baby brain. I bought 3 different kinds of bottles because Grace said the trick is options. I asked Claire to show me the swaddle again, and she laughed and put her hands over mine and said, "You remember?" And I did, the way your body remembers the steps to a dance it loved. Lila came home on a Wednesday afternoon with a diaper bag and a knit hat and a laugh that surprised her when it came out. The adoptive parents brought a photo album with notes in the margins. We sat at my kitchen table and said the words that mean, "I see you and I will not try to erase you." We wrote out a schedule and decided who would be at which pediatrician visit and who would get to do the first birthday cake and who would hold the camera when a little girl tried frosting and then stared at her hand like it had never belonged to her before. We drew a map that did not erase any of the roads, but made sure the bridges were wide. You already know the rest, I suppose, if you're the kind of person who believes a farm can hold a life the way a hand holds a bird. The first fever. The first time she fell asleep on my chest and my shirt was damp with her breath. The time she learned to clap. The day she said, clear as a bell, "Mama," to 2 women, one on each side of her, and we both cried because it was messy and lovely and exactly what justice looks like when it moves into a house and asks where the towels go. We drove to the cemetery on a warm day, and I set a blanket on the grass beside Ethan's stone and let Lila pull dandelions and hand them to me with the solemn expectation that I would do the correct thing with them. I did. I lined them up along the base like a parade. I told her about her father. I told her he fixed broken things for a living and came home smelling like diesel and rain. I told her he wrote letters because he didn't know how else to make sure the truth outlived him. I told her that sometimes love lives in a bracelet, and sometimes love lives in a will, and sometimes love lives in watching a woman you don't know walk up your porch steps without knocking because she misses a baby more than she misses being right. The adoption became permanent a year later. The judge was a new one with kind eyes and a way of pronouncing names that made them sound like promises. He asked me the questions they always ask. Could I carry a child up a flight of stairs? Could I call an ambulance without losing my nerve? Could I plan for a future that likely wouldn't include seeing a person to adulthood? I can't promise living to 90, I said, and the courtroom laughed because you need laughter like you need oxygen. But I can promise I'll love her like my own life and I'll build a community around her so that when I go, she won't fall through any holes. Approved, he said, and hit the gavel. And it sounded like someone closing a door softly in a house where a baby was finally asleep. Clara took a plea deal. The agency did too. Daniel paid fines that won't touch the harm. I don't have room in me anymore for their names unless I'm asked. What I have room for is learning the names of the kids on Lila's daycare sign-in sheet and the cashier at the grocery who always gives her a sticker. What I have room for is the smell of strawberries on a June afternoon and the way she squints when the sun ricochets off the tractor's chrome. What I have room for is teaching her how to plant zinnias in a straight line and how to check the sky before a storm. What I have room for is telling her the truth when she asks, "Where did I come from? And why did I have 2 mommies for a while? And why do we have a bracelet in a frame on the mantle?" You came from love and bad decisions and a stubborn old woman who decided she was not done fighting yet, I will say when she's ready. You came from letters your dad wrote because he wanted his words to walk after his feet stopped. You came from a nurse who picked you up and said, "Hi there, baby," like she'd known you forever. You came from a couple who loved you big before they knew how complicated love can be. You came from a farm that was willing to rearrange the furniture to make room. When she turns 5, we will stand on the porch together and I will show her the place where the dirt is a different color. She will be too young to understand that holes can be filled and still leave a seam. But someday she will know. Someday she will read the letters in Ethan's small, careful print. Someday she will wear the bracelet as a charm on a chain. Not because I want her to carry weight, but because I want her to feel how light something can be when you name it correctly. I still sit on the steps at night and listen for storms. I still wear Ethan's coat when the wind makes a sound like a far train. Sometimes I hear the dinging of a car door left open, the metronome of a life that did not close properly the first time. When that happens, I put my hand flat on the wood and say the names of the people who are here now. Lila, Grace, Claire, Reeves, the couple in Lincoln whose dog is named Margot, the nurse with the twins, the girl from the church group who knew the bracelet by its number. I say their names, so the house learns them, so when I'm gone, the boards can tell the next person who lives here what happened and why it mattered. On the day we installed the new porch swing, Lila stood with her hands on her hips like a tiny foreman and said, "Higher," in a voice that brooked no delay. I pushed it until the chains sang. She threw her head back and laughed the kind of laugh that made the birds restless in the cottonwoods. The sky went that particular Iowa blue that always makes me think of clean sheets. I looked out across the fields and thought, a person can build a life that is both true and kind, even if it starts with a night in the rain and a fire that should not have burned. If you drove by then, you would have seen only a woman on a porch and a little girl on a swing. You wouldn't have known about the letters under the porch, or the bracelet in the frame, or the way a judge's pen can be heavier than it looks. You wouldn't have known that love is sometimes a ledger you balance with stubbornness and coffee and the help of strangers. You wouldn't have known that when a storm threatens, a farm will tell you the truth if you stand still and listen. But I would. I do. And when Lila fell asleep that night with her cheek pink from the sun, I sat in the doorway of her room and watched her breathe. I thought about Ethan's neat block letters telling me to tell the truth even when they call you crazy. I thought about the girl I used to be who believed the sky could be read like a story. I thought about how stories save us when nothing else does. This is ours. It starts with a hole in the ground and ends with a swing in the air. In between, there is the hard work of being human. There is the quiet miracle of a bracelet that meant you, and a porch that held secrets until we were brave enough to open them, and a little girl who laughs like a field you just planted when the forecast finally says rain.